So, got a doozy here for you today. We're gonna look at the MI5 building and the MI6 building, which is very close to Westminster and Parliament. Parliament being just down that way and not too far from where we are. So a little bit of a short one here today, but exploring some of the River Thames a little bit further down south. And here's the MI5 building, constructed from 1929 to 1930 by Sir Frank Baines. And it was not initially intended to be the MI5 building. It was occupied by various tenants before it was also used as a bomb shelter down in the basement during the Blitz. But coming up around the 80s, it became the headquarters for ICI Energy. And then eventually, it was decided to move MI5 in there, because MI5 was spread out across lots of smaller buildings. The government decided that they needed better accommodations and more space for their work, especially in the digital age. They started to be able to need to accommodate for having lots of computers, lots of digitally minded offices. So this is where they are. They've been here since 1994. And if you look at the building, you can see that it's 8 floors above here ground. We're obviously not allowed to go inside, sadly, to see it. As they say on their website, the best way of seeing the building from the inside is getting a job there. But they say rumor has it that there's 8 floors above ground and 8 floors below ground, totaling 16 floors. So if you can believe that, it goes down quite deep. But this whole area still has a lot of underground tunnel networks, especially from the Blitz. And it's, it looks neoclassical like most buildings here. But I suppose the most distinguishing feature is, as one other architect scathingly called it, its cheese-colored rooftop. That's how you can tell it apart from all the other neoclassical buildings in the area, which we see right up there. But yeah, obviously, if you don't know MI5 and MI6, MI5 is the secret intelligence for domestic affairs. So if you compare it to America, it's a bit like, it's equivalent to America's FBI. Whereas MI6, those are the cool, swanky agents that get to go abroad to the Bahamas, the ones that Ian Fleming based his James Bond figure on. So we'll see where they're based very soon. They've got a very different building to this one here, actually. Completely opposite architectural style. So if you look back down that road that we left behind, that road is called Horse Ferry Road. And that is a nod to this bridge's past. Before it was a proper bridge. And the first bridge was built in the middle of the 1800s. I believe it was the 1860s, the first bridge that went across here. But before bridges were really a thing going across the Thames, you actually had this horse-drawn ferry that would take people across. So there's a little nod to that past there, when people used to take little ferries going back and forth across the River Thames. You might also have noticed these good old pineapples that we see around. Again, that old show of wealth and opulence, and I believe we have covered that in our Lincoln's Inn video. But you see them here again. Again, another show of, a subtle show of wealth. Well, maybe not so subtle, but it's certainly there. And the bridge itself, so this bridge was, the bridge before this was built in the Victorian era, but this bridge that we're standing on now is another 1930s construction. That was built in 1932. And you might notice, so it's not very clear here, but if you ever see the bridge from the outside, you'll see the bridge is red, whereas Westminster Bridge on the other side has been colored green. And they're actually matching the seats of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So this red bridge, which is on the south side of Parliament, matches the red benches inside the House of Lords. Whereas conversely, Westminster Bridge over there with the green matches the green seats of the House of Commons. So it's very clear we're on the south side of Parliament right here. So as you can see here, we've got some strategically placed phone numbers for the Samaritans. Unfortunately, these bridges especially Westminster Bridge, but particularly Lambeth Bridge here, is occasionally used by people who consider making the jump into the Thames, sadly. And you might see that come around. So I suppose that's some of the more unpleasant history around here. We've also got, we can actually see the COVID memorial wall not too far from here, where every heart represents one person who had on their death certificate the cause being COVID-19. So yeah, but veering away from the darker stuff, I suppose on a more light note, this was the filming location of a particular scene in Harry Potter. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. He drives across, you can see the double-decker bus here actually. If we just see the double-decker bus coming right past here, they actually filmed the scene where the triple-decker bus that Harry Potter is in, the night bus, squeezes in between two double-decker buses and goes through them. And that was here on this bridge where they filmed that. So, a little bit of a Harry Potter reference there as well. But otherwise, I think that covers Lambeth Bridge. Okay, so we just left behind the MI5 building, which you can actually still see from here. You can just see a bit of its cheese-colored rooftop there. Now we are at the MI6 building, or SIS building as they call it, housing the Secret Intelligence Service for Foreign Affairs. And this is their current headquarters. It's an open secret now. Everyone knows where they are. They have tried in the past to hide it before. The government even denied their existence back in the day, but now it's clear as day to everyone where they've based themselves. And as an effect, they have made this building into pretty much a fortress. We have talked about the American Embassy before. This is probably the building that could rival the American Embassy in its durability and security. So, not to get too dark here, but if nuclear warfare was to come around, this is probably one of the buildings that would stay behind and still remain standing, I imagine. So, it's several meters of thick concrete. Even the glass is laminated with 6 layers of bulletproof glass. So, good luck trying to get through it. You can see there's lots of fences around as well, tall fences, of course, cameras everywhere. They have to amp up the security when everyone knows where they are. They moved here in 1994, same year that they actually moved MI6. So they've done that at the same time, relocating their secret services. They used to be in Century House, which is just a little bit further upriver, closer to Lambeth where we were before. And they tried to keep it a secret then, but everyone knew that they were based in there. Every taxi driver, every tour guide that you talked to apparently knew exactly where they were. So it wasn't a very well-kept secret. And before even then, they were based in 54 Broadway, which is just off of Parliament Square, not too far from Parliament Square, around St. James's Park station. So then they managed to keep themselves anonymous, but they had to pretend they were a different company. But that is how they operated. But now, these days, this is their modern location. And right behind them, you can see some of the skyscrapers of the Vauxhall cluster. You can also see the St. George Wharf Tower, which is apparently the tower that began the whole craze of regenerating, at least part of the regeneration project in Nine Elms, which we've talked about in a previous video. We are close to that area here as well. We're in Vauxhall. A lot of the craze with the skyscrapers began with this skyscraper here, because they were selling it to foreign interests to give them a prime location to have their offices or their apartments or wherever it might be. So it's been a gamble for real estate and for investment companies to try and attract wealthy customers here. Okay, so even before this was occupied by MI6, the inspiration behind this architecture was very much inspired by Bankside. a lot of the modernist buildings around Bankside. So Terry Farrell wanted to make an urban village, designed this place with that in mind, with some Aztec and Mayan temple influences, which you can see pretty evidently here along the benches. And also a little bit in the design and decoration. Maybe some Egyptian influence too. So we've got the progenitor of many of these skyscrapers here is the St. George Wharf Tower, which is, well, it's not quite a hotel, but it is residential, but it almost might as well be hotel standards that you're living under. And then all these other skyscrapers started springing up around it. It would be wrong to call it a cluster exactly, though. And I think there's a great quote by a Guardian article here by Oliver Wainwright, who uses a nice metaphor here for the skyscrapers. I'll read it out to you. Separated by roaring 6-lane roads, the buildings are actually spaced too far apart to form any kind of cluster, standing with the awkward air of a socially distanced gathering of portly executives in ill-fitting suits. I think that works pretty well to describe many of these skyscrapers here. And many of them kind of look like they're ill-fitting blocks that are put together. That's taken from Wainwright's article as well, to be fair, but I thought it was a very apt description of these interesting skyscrapers that have popped up here in Vauxhall. So we're finishing here at a relatively new construction project that was finished largely 2010. So they started opening blocks here from 2001 to 2010. And it's right next to the MI6 building, which makes it ideal for us to also cover this here very briefly. Not a whole lot to say about it, other than a lot of money has been injected into this here. Let's just put it like that. There's a subgroup of the Barclay Holdings Limited, which I believe is an investor firm. I may have to double check on that. But yeah, they opened this whole thing here, made it a massive complex for apartments. So there's both residential buildings, office buildings, gyms. It's a bit like a little mini village that they've tried to construct here. A village for the affluent, I'm sure. Especially since this tower was the one that sort of set it off. That's the crowning achievement around here. The St. George Wharf Tower. We can see that here as well. Don't know if you can see that there. But that is essentially almost completely residential. It's all apartments. But they are incredibly expensive. And they are apartments that are geared for people who want more of a long-term hotel experience in London. So you can imagine these are people usually with foreign interests, usually from outside the country, that come and can live 24/7 for years on end with the same services that they would expect in a hotel. It is a millionaire's playground around here, I say, at least in that tower. Here is a little bit different, but the rest of it is sort of sprung out of the tower and connected to the tower here. Here is more of a mix of, well, office workers and others that can afford to live there. But it does count in that whole regeneration project. We're not very far from Nine Elms. That's right down there. So that's part of this whole south of the river project of trying to developing that. Battersea Power Station is not too far from here either. So we've already talked about embankment and the Great Stink of 1858 and just how bad the pollution was in the Thames water, and the fact that many people still drank of the Thames water, at least if you were the lower 1/3 of the population. And so, yeah, well, many people got obviously lots of terrible diseases from drinking the polluted water. But here's a funny image from 1828, where a Victorian woman is looking through a microscope and seeing all the horrible monsters that are in the Thames water here, which I think is quite charming. She jerks back in horror after seeing what she's found in the Thames water, and it's appropriately ghastly here, as you can see. I do like that.